may I ask all the presenters to join us on stage here? There are tons of microphones here. Everybody has a microphone. Great. Very good. I'll stand a little bit to the side. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your insights and giving us your information, sharing knowledge. So maybe we start off, is there any questions from the audience, particularly to what was presented? So maybe, because we didn't do Q&As after the presentations. Christian, yes?
Hi, this is from Matthias, but anybody else who wants to jump in. I was a bit surprised by you not picking this example for fraud. It was in the news a couple of months ago. There was like a huge financial transaction out of Shanghai, I think, and there was a video conference, and there were 4 people in it, and 3 of them were imaginary people. And it was, I think, 50 million or 25 million that were transferred out. So basically, isn't this like the end of digital? Because you can't trust the photos, you can't trust the video, you can't trust the voice. I mean, in the end, if you want to know if somebody is real, you have to be in the room with them, right?
Yeah, no, I think that is a challenge, and I actually forgot to tell you about the biggest scam. I was about to tell you about it. But actually, one of the biggest scams, we'll come back to your question, was actually this, what was it, this like paycheck protection program in a payslip protection program in the US, yeah. And I think actually the population managed to scam over $100 billion US actually in this just funding. But I think what you point out is actually a very interesting thing, that both voice and images
in real
so
time.
on, yeah. But I think it's like, this is also what we see as a challenge, is that many countries, Switzerland is actually one of them, where you actually don't have an electronic ID. This is actually one thing that actually makes it a bit easier for countries, like there are many countries in Europe today, in South America, Scandinavia, they have implemented that, and that actually takes down a lot of the fraud attempts. Yeah? So you actually build in like an improved like a 2-factor identification layer. Yeah? But this is, it's scary, and I think it is about making transaction by just looking at someone on the screen, that I would simply not recommend for a bank, especially not these amounts either.
But don't do business via your computer, right? So.
You can do business via a computer, but you can authenticate in another way.
Okay. Anybody else on that question?
Well,
the end of the digital?
No, actually, well, there are several platforms, for example, YouTube and Facebook, that are trying to either identify any digital generated content. So, and there are other attempts. I mean, in terms of you're sending money, you probably really want to know who you're sending money to. But for other kind of uses where it's not so important, maybe authorization is not what you want, because sometimes they were talking about artists and things like that. So what the ideas that are trying to bring to the table is provenance. Like, how do we actually certify a provenance, a human provenance, or a real fact provenance, instead of just being synthetic or... So there are several ideas, sadly, ideas at the moment.
If I just may play the devil's advocate for a second. I understand for the financial aspect of things, you want to make sure that when someone asks you money, it's actually someone who's asking you money. But I think it has its advantages in the pharma industry to some extent. Right now, we have so many information on patients that maybe that could help create fake patients that will allow us to get some better insights in certain clinical trials without maybe having to touch on more sensitive population. We'll be able to extrapolate on more minorities that are not that much implemented within certain level historic clinical trials. So I agree for the money side of things and security side of things, but and like everything, it's not necessarily the tool, it's how you use it, right? But in this specific case, I think it could have to some degree its advantages, especially within the clinical and preclinical side of things.
Yeah, I can actually confirm. We're actually building something similar, like you speak about.
Nice, we might need to talk afterwards.
I actually forgot one thing that actually will come very soon. I think it's actually voice recognition, like that will actually recognize, help to recognize fake voices.
Okay. Any other questions about what you heard, about the presentations? Is there a hand up? No. Okay, so sorry, I didn't see. Sorry.
Many thanks for the interesting talks. I have a more general question. What is your experience with the difficulties of large language model to cope up with missing data?
Sorry, missing or losing?
No, missing data. So if you train, yes, and then it is just going into the direction. What happens if a customer or whoever is putting out a question where the information was not there in the training and so on? What's your experience with it?
Maybe I can answer that. So, as I previously showed, there are basically the two main concepts on how to do that. So, either you add or provide this information in the context, so that means it's basically your input that you provide. That could be quite big of an input, and usually you don't see that as a user when it's done. So that's one way. And the other way is that you really do fine-tuning on a pre-trained model. You can also do more pre-training. That means you just basically have a really big corpus of data. Let's say there can be 50 documents, that could also be 10,000 or 1 million documents. And then you just proceed training, where, for example, Meta stopped for like another, we call it epochs. That means one round trip of seeing all the data, and then technically the model should be able to respond to your question, to the private data.
Yes, but thank you. But this means that the data is somewhere there, yes. But how can the model cope? How will it recognize that the data are not there? Because I mean, the large language models, they are working associative, and I have not seen so far. I'm really not an expert in large language models, so I have not seen something like a confidence score or something like this for a large language model. Yes. So how does the model know that it has no appropriate associative data for a question?
So there's one way that is usually done, and that is by asking the model gently if it can please say that it doesn't know when you ask for something. So that's really being done right now. And then you could technically also invent some sort of confidential thingy that you just mentioned by looking at the confidence intervals of the individual subtokens that are generated. So, I mean, for all the for all the subtokens, or let's say words, if we want to speak more easily, you can see how confident the model is in choosing this specific token. So technically you could, that's definitely already, people are already doing that, so you can just, let's say, compute an average of the confidence for all the individual subtokens.
Okay, thank you. Should you multiply the confidence intervals instead of calculating the average?
Most likely you don't want to calculate the average. Yeah.
But, I mean, there's also, I think this is, maybe we have the same idea, but the idea also that knowledge graph or visual graph is also a good way, because you might be missing data, but you might not missing data everywhere in the panel of what you're looking for. So looking at the connection and looking at the context, for example, if it's context related to what you have, could also help you highlight what's missing, and therefore, because it's, yeah, you can you can ask the system what's missing. If you're missing something, but it's not necessarily going to tell you what's missing. So I guess it's also, then you could cope with synthetic data or tools like this. And I think it's like I think we all agreed in our presentation, it's not just one thing. It's a kind of like finding the right combination and fine-tuning things together. But figuring out what's missing, I think, is also the core of the issue, really.
So this means that would be the density of nodes around the question.
Should be, yeah. And also, do you have clusters within your networks that shows that you have way more on one thing, and then in the middle there's a big gap, and then it's investigation, I guess.
Thank you. No, just about this, actually not the same, but I think what we're building today for many companies is actually a RAG solution, so retrieval augmented generation. I don't know what is the application of your problem, but I think that is what many go for today, because then you are sure that actually it finds the answer in your company documents, and then of course, like we built for one medical device company that, in terms of customer service, then of course it's very important that actually that the explanation is more or less given exactly how the manual is written, while for another company it was more like mergers and acquisition, and then you can allow it to be a bit more elaborative and so on, because you're not taking decisions that will impact the life or death of humans. Yeah.
I just wanted to add a little bit on that. I mean, it depends on what is your use case, like where you are going to implement it. If you want to insight into the confidential data, then use usually RAG, because that you keep your data inside. The other thing is, if it's going to be for critical decisions, what they are starting to do is training it continuously. So that's why you also need an expert in the domain to actually flag the parameters in each one of these pre-trainings or extra epochs that you run in your models to actually fine-tune in a different way. So, but yeah.
I mean, just on that to add as well, that's why we also mentioned in our presentation the risk-based approach, to really understand where is the risk if you are making such summaries or want insight on the knowledge actually side. But I think it's also generally why people in the field of not only machine learning and AI and LLM currently always say, please do remember that you need domain experts still in the field that will check it, because currently right now we just cannot leave it running and expect everything is fine.
So that's also good news for the software developers. It's not open the box, plug it in, and everything is fine. No. And then it's like the movie like explodes and suddenly continue. Sorry.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answers.
One more question over there.
One more. There you go.
There.
Okay, so I'll continue playing Advocados Diablo here. But you're all going into the technical side of this, and I really like this about these talks, because most of the time when you hear about AI in public, it's like some guy like Sam Altman saying, give it to me and I'll make sure it'll make us the paradise, and if not, it's going to be the Terminator. Give me billions, And I see, from what I've seen, on the one hand, there's really some very interesting technology at the core of this. But this is not the stuff that's being presented to the masses at large. So can you give people who are not hardcore techies advice to see, to distinguish the bullshit from not the bullshit, Because like one example, if some guy tells you, this is, everybody can be a software developer, if you've been in IT for the last 20 years, anytime anybody starts talking about, this is the democratization of X, then he's trying to rip you off. So, is there some help you can give people to distinguish the good stuff from the bad stuff?
I think there is one thing is, when I get this question, I ask, can you mention one profession that has disappeared in the last 50 years? And that is not so easy, because that is what everyone says, AI will replace all the jobs, but actually come up with a profession that has actually disappeared. And it's not so easy. I bring up one example, is the elevator operator. That I think we managed to push the button today, we don't need a guy there. So my answer usually to this is that, yeah, of course, jobs will be replaced, but it's probably with people with AI knowledge that will replace people without AI knowledge. Yeah? And I think that we can probably all buy into that. We will have more efficient workforce leveraging AI, and of course, those that will suffer is the ones that will not leverage the AI.
Yeah, I think it's and this is how we presented a bit the company we work for, right? It's a question of adapting, because the tool evolved, the way we work evolved, but also you still need that human brain and human logic, to be honest. Because also, let's be honest, the AI is just a representation of some guy's brain, then got trained by another guy's brain, etc. But if you think of more business related, for example, yes, the way today we do business analysis, for example, probably will shift, but will shift to maybe be able to compose with AI and prompt writing and document generation, but you still need that human touch of making sure you discuss with the right stakeholder. That a robot, well, I don't think we're there yet, so correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we're there yet, where a robot will go and interview the stakeholders and figure out the business analysis, even if you can generate the documents today, just to give you a bit more business perspective on things.
Yeah, but I mean, what you're saying is adopt, right? Use the technology. But the question is, how do you distinguish the obviously bullshit AI parts from the not bullshit parts? So how do you find the technology that actually works? That's not the hype-driven thing. How can you help people distinguish between these two elements, and they're clearly both present?
But I will ask you a little bit, for what? For consuming it, for implementing the functionality inside their organizations, or like, as I said, we can be a consumer. As a software developers, I created my Midjourney amazing presentation. Actually, it helped in my slides. Not Midjourney, but at least the Copilot version. But anyway, so as a consumer, or what do you mean? Like where it can be, it has different roles in today's world.
And also the same tool for someone will be bullshit, and for someone else will be great. It really is also perspective, or like you said, what you want to use it for, but also what is actually the tool good for if you dig, right? Because Copilot is good for code up to an extent, but then it's actually better at managing sometimes some of the documentation. It really is a question of how you use the tool and for what for. Like anything, right? A good tool, someone will sell you, someone will love it, someone will hate it.
I mean, I can point you to some really interesting sessions about security where people in stage have tricked Copilot into suggesting blatantly unsecure code, either by the context of the functions that they have opened or the files that they have opened. So, I mean, we can misuse the tool too. So the question is, this tool, when it's going to be useful, I can tell you as a rule of thumb in things that you already know how to automate, because you know the output and you are only speeding up the process. In the ones that it happens with low frequency, let's say the black swans, well, it's interesting because we haven't even created a way to verify that solution. So that's when we use best practices. There is if you only have best practices to improve the quality of what you're producing, but you are not verifying the outputs, maybe do you want to leave that to an agent that potentially can create troublesome answers? And in the find me a very creative solution, the jury is still out. I mean, we're using it for calculating and creating, or even predicting where are the new compounds, or even we have been doing the folding of proteins for several years, and it has been successful there.
Maybe just from my side to add here, as a professional, if that's addressed, then of course you do validation and benchmarking of different tools, and every use case is different. But I think you were mostly relating or referencing to normal people that are not too much into tech. So there I would even say there is not really a way to distinguish between that, to be honest, and it's really difficult to try to educate people on it, because we don't have to go so sophisticated to talk about tech. Let's just remember how it was 2 years ago about simple misinformation about COVID. I mean, we don't need to speak about sophisticated AI to get people tricked about very basic misinformation. So there it already starts. I think this is a little bit trying to use common human sense, that, for example, if I have my friends that are not so much into it, they come to me and say, what is this about? And that's the best way, because we still learn from each other, I guess. To have a recipe that will tell you what is good and what is bad. Do I also know it always? Difficult to say.
I actually fully agree with that, and I think a lot of awareness helps. I mean, we also get a lot of news that are not really correct, or we learned some kind of feeling whether some news is correct or not. And I think that's pretty much the same also in the AI space. And specifically to if a tool or let's say a prediction makes sense or not. I mean, not even the experts in the field really. They call themselves, or we call them, the godfathers of AI. Not even they they do agree on the progress in the next few years. So how should we do that? Or people who are not in the field.
Godfathers. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentations, first of all. You just asked the question, the disappearing jobs. Yeah. I'm 47 years old. I'm in industry since I was 13. Okay, the jobs, any kind of jobs, didn't disappear, but many people disappeared. In the big companies, I work for the pharmaceuticals and IoT companies in the IT. What happened is we used to manage our services, our data centers, and then offshoring, outsourcing, all the things like that. 50 people working only for the infrastructure, 30 people working for the software development, they all disappeared. So the jobs are there, but only a few people managing the services. So many things disappeared. So at the end of the day, what's happening is monopolization. Big companies are appearing, and then they are eating the cake, and you have to eat only pasta. So that's the main problem. And along the way, his concern was a little bit of non-technical. So the bullshit side and the non-bullshit side. In the real life, nobody cares about that bullshit side, because since everything is so digital, all the data is being collected to the big companies, and nobody cares because we only want a comfortable life, easy life. So who cares if your pictures or your data is being transmitted from your devices to the headquarters, to the godfathers. How about privacy, data privacy, jobs, and then now the LLM, the most known, which we use a lot, even at home, for small things, Olalama, designed, developed, and released by Facebook. I don't need to talk about Facebook. How come that guy is releasing that piece of software we don't even know how it works? So we are all experts of AI, data, infrastructure, blah, blah. We don't even know what's going on behind the algorithm there. So, and for the future, okay, everything looks good, life is going to be comfortable, but for the children, it's not so hopeful.
Is there a question?
No, he asked the question, I answered.
Just to come to this, because I was very bleak. I agree that there is a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of black boxes and a lot of monopolization. But I guess there's also, in certain closed doors, the idea of bringing up regulation. For example,
Which regulation? She just talked about the GDPR, and we never saw that functioning in the real life. And you just write some internal SOPs within the company. All the guys, they used to call them data managers. They disappeared, and now you rely on your.
Okay, I'll try to give you one example that I know about, and then.
And
I can't answer all of it. Okay, I'm just trying. But there's, for example, a big thing that got democratized, and it's, to me, I think it's a big question and a big problem. It's people just doing 23andMe and all of this type of stuff. And how do you protect your genetic code? This has been monopolized, and this is private data that people, I don't think, realize how private it is. Your genetic code is very private. It should not be freely shared. But I know there's a will on a global European way to put in place rules for those companies to be regulated. I understand that it's going all over the place, but it needs to be started somewhere, and there is willingness to regulate stuff. Maybe it's a little bit too late, I don't know, but at least there is willingness to...
Let me tell you about the regulation. The
Maybe we can have this discussion afterwards?
No, I'm just trying to share my opinions as well. The OpenAI CEO...
Sorry, there are other questions here.
Okay.
Can we take them? We can ask. We can
discuss
have the conversation afterwards. I think. Yes, please.
Okay, short question. AI needs resources, and here mainly processing power, which is exponentially going on. So my question is: do you see, because you have so much insight in different industries, do you see companies or industry teaming up to form negotiation power towards the big techs? Because the background of my question, so that's the question, the background of it is demand is going up because AI needs, because more people are trying things, because whatever. Supply will shrink, Taiwan, resources. So, and then ultimately there's the risk of, all these great ideas ending up with limitation of processing power, because what you've seen with the PVs the last years, there won't be, this power to do this, and the dependency towards Microsoft, Google, Facebook, etc., will increase. So, do you see some things that there's a negotiation power towards those companies teaming up?
No. Actually, this is the sad case. I mean, one of the things that you can see is the energy consumption, as you mentioned, the water consumption. If you go into the news, start looking at a startup that actually went bankrupt because they couldn't pay the energy bills for training new models, it's increasing. And you can see not only all the energy that we spent in things that never saw the light of day, but also the money that were invested in these companies that it was completely lost. OpenAI started as a non-profit. They actually, after their kindergarten event, I'm preferring, because honestly, I mean, it was a kindergarten, like, don't play with my toys. It's my toy. No, it's your toy. No, anyway. So after this event that happened fairly recent, they actually closed even more in terms of what are their goals and how collaborative they're going to be in the near future. I mean, they actually opened at the beginning, even before they start releasing their algorithms, collaborations with, for example, Khan Academy and doing something else. Suddenly that was also closed, and now it's for profit. So, no, sorry. We're going to burn the world.
Any perspectives on this?
I mean, there certainly is the open source space, right? And there are big companies like, for example, Meta, that are pushing the boundaries there quite a lot. I mean, their biggest models, which they spend millions of dollars on for training, they open source them. Also with a license that permits you for using it until like a specific number of users. So I mean, it's still coming from Meta in the end, but it allows you to run it locally. And we definitely know how how these models work. You know, we know that the architecture, not in detail for sure, but the basis of and the theory behind it is definitely known.
Okay, but surely an important angle, the consumption, energy consumption, seems a limiting factor. So I would like to do a closing round now, because the big question was also what's going to happen with the software industry, this development. We haven't talked about it. So I guess you guys also develop with large language models. So just roughly, how much faster are you? Or could you give him some kind of figure? What do you, could we say that, I mean, so Nicola is not here, because he said he would be 90% faster, just to give it. Just to throw that in, right? So, do you believe that, or and if we are faster, what does that particularly mean for our industry here in Switzerland? Like is that positive or negative? Please.
So right now, I don't think we are at 90% for sure, and it also depends a bit on what, let's say. What kinds of languages you're using and stuff, and but I would say maybe roughly like 20% faster, but I think that's it right now.
20%? How much do you give?
I'll agree with it. About 20%. And it also, again, very depends on what you're doing, who's using it. In the sense of, as you try to democratize such tool to maybe broaden it to their use beyond just coders or developers, for example, then obviously there's a learning curve for everyone. So you actually 20% slower when you learn, and then you get increasingly faster. But I think we're in this middle ground where it really depends who's using it, what's the proficiency, how fast they got into it. But yeah, no. 80% is a dream. Maybe some people, but it would be.
Okay. But it's increasing, right? You would say it's increasing.
It's increasing, but there's also a new tool every day, right? Like you presented. So it's a
one step, 3 steps ahead is 4 back. Or what?
Yes.
Okay. Please.
No, but I want to say maybe even up to what many of machine learning engineers in our company say, even up to 50%. Can be more efficient. But I think it's also important to have the aspect is that on the programming work, but then I think the everyday work for them is that they have the daily stand-up and they have a few other things, so that doesn't mean that you can do your 8-hour work in 4 hours. Yeah? So I think that is one aspect. And another aspect is actually that, like we're building this for a US software company, is actually that their previous users has to be like knowledgeable in SQL, for example, to be able to use the tool, like a supply chain optimization tool. There we actually help them to build like a chat, so actually non-coders can actually use the tool. Yeah? So that is also maybe one aspect out of this, that you can actually increase your user base for people that don't have the coding experience to actually use tools that requires coding experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that was about the case that would have been presented. Yeah.
How was it?
Yeah, in this direction. Yeah. Please.
I honestly wouldn't look only at it in the perspective of how much faster is someone as a software developer. It's like we have had tools that increase your productivity in terms of administrative processes for other people. I think this is to some extent exactly the same just for software developers, but will free up some time for you to think of more feature or better features. So I don't want to say it, how can I say, just from the perspective it makes me faster, so I'm done in 6 hours. No, I can make maybe a more qualitative, better software because I can think of other aspects of how to improve my product because I don't have to lose so much time on the basics maybe to set the foundation of the code itself. That's how I would like to see if I have really numbers on it. I don't know, maybe 20 to 30% currently, but it really depends on whether you do something out of your own idea, so you are in control of it, or if you really have to first translate a requirement from someone else. It is also an aspect of that, I would say.
Okay, in my case, it's the same. It depends on the level of the person that it's if it's an intro level developer, then maybe the capabilities of explaining code is really interesting for them, because then they have like this kind of a trainer at their own rate and without making any judgments in their questions or checking their answers. For other experienced developers, maybe sometimes what I have used it and I see other colleagues using it is, for example, creating plugins for technologies or platforms that we haven't done it before. So we don't know the API. So that is very helpful, but we already have the experience to say, yay, no. So there is already like all those years of experience. The other thing is, for example, for testing, not for actually creating the test, but sometimes it's for creating the user scenarios. And again, what it's also providing you is with this first idea. Like I always tell people, like as a developer, sometimes I have this fright of the clear page. And suddenly I can ask for something, and it can be a very rough idea that I have to evaluate, analyze, evaluate, and then decide, or augment or reduce. So in this case, by presenting me a copilot that can play different roles in a single prompt, it's really interesting. But I agree, it's not measurable because I'm talking about the different levels, I'm talking about the different use cases, I'm talking about the different expectations.
So, if you allow the last round, so start with you again. Efficiency gains. What does that mean for like a company like Haraku or companies here in Switzerland and Basel? Basically, smaller, specialized companies, right? Software companies. What does that mean? Are we going to be more dependent on the big guys, as we heard? Or is there a possibility of having a self or, let's say, sovereign usage of these kind of technologies? What is your perspective on that?
Well, I would love to say that I have a crystal ball and I can see the future, but I don't. And I still think that context is really important, and it's something that is missing from all the schools. So we will benefit by learning and applying and keeping up to date with the technologies, because the necessities, I mean, it solves really interesting cases. So by being on top of the technology, we can offer that journey to our clients and build something with them. Internally, yes, as I said, in different use cases, we are benefiting from it. But we also need to have the experience and the knowledge to steer away ourselves from the dark corners and steer our clients away from the mismatch between use case and tool.
Okay. Please, Christina,
Yeah,
specifically life science and this part.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say why I would define it as dependent. I think because we all learned the basics of it, and I think something that you also said, like, why still people should go to universities is in order to learn the basics and to know what is the tool telling me. If we continue or start to believe that the thinking will be done from someone else, like that tool, I think in 3 or 4 generations, I would be worried if that just keeps on like that. For us today, I wouldn't, if tomorrow that stops, then, well, we just maybe go as business as usual, I don't know. Because, currently right now, the crystal ball will probably say.
Okay. Peter.
Yeah, but let's think, because I think there are like maybe a few factors on your question. I think one thing when you say those tech giants and you refer to the Silicon Valley and so on, I believe here is actually a change that is happening. I think Europe has not been a good place for startups, and especially like deep tech startups. Europe is more, how to say, pro, like business development, incremental improvement startups and so on. But I think this is changing. I'm working for like 2 different VCs, and here we can see actually the companies that are coming out in Europe, they are becoming actually super interesting, and we're starting to have a few examples already. So I think that part is improving, but we are far away from, of course, how it is in US. And then I think you are alluding to, okay, is it possible to keep jobs here in Switzerland? Probably you refer to another salary levels compared to other places. But I would say from my experience, of course, when it's all vanilla software and AI development, for sure, Switzerland will be impacted. But I think for us that work with very, very hard to solve problems, it's more that, first of all, you get the job if you can solve the problem, and two, if you can do it in a reasonable amount of time. And that reasonable amount of time can be like 1 quarter compared to like a vanilla AI agency. So we are actually building up teams here in Switzerland because I think it's here where we actually find the talents.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it comes also to creativity, right? This was also what you were touching on earlier. Is, I mean, like everything, we all kind of became dependent on certain tools to some degree, but that allowed us to do more. And I think that's just the idea, right? It's also a little bit funny to me because I think it's at least in my short life, this is the first time where I feel like there's this. It looks, when you hear some people, the impending doom of like everything will change, you'll never be the same in a few years because this tool will take over your life. I'm sure it's not the first time in history, but this is the first time for me. But also looking at history, it never really was that drastic. I think it's always linked to human creativity and then, yeah, maybe freeing a bit of our brain with the boring stuff will allow us to do more and do better and in one timeline, and what that would impact locally, I don't know, but I don't know. I like to think it allows us to be more creative and do better things, but I know there's also a darker side to it, for sure.
Yeah, actually, we experienced that. I was a journalist once and wrote about the tech industry in Switzerland since the 90s. So in 2000, they would actually say, okay, typical Swiss software companies, they would just vanish doing like projects, right? Because everything's going to be offshore and nearshore, whatever, right? That was around 2000. And that's when we come to TINM, right? Because back then, maybe there were like 30 people. So how many are you now?
A bit more than 600, I think.
Yeah, you see, so 20 years ago, they told us TINM, a typical company would just vanish, now 600 people. So yes, but your perspective on the future.
Can you repeat that question again?
Yes, the question was, what would you imagine for typically Swiss-made software companies? The future, if you look at, applying those technologies to develop software, is that a good thing or a bad thing or neutral?
Well, I guess it's not going to be any different in Switzerland than in any other country, I think. So we have access to all the tools that other countries have as well. So in that sense, I don't think Switzerland is going to lag behind there. But yeah, I guess probably people that do know how to use AI in their daily work, they probably going to replace others that don't use AI. So yeah, I think that's my take on it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments, for your nice talks. Thank you for coming. I will now show the latest slides. I have some slides left. Thank you. Yes, thanks to our sponsors, TINM, Swiss Life, Bedina, Zion, Car. Off. Oh, now it's back. One more slide. Thank you for coming. So the buffet will be ready for you. There will be beer, etc. And our next event is on the 24th of September. So stay tuned and see you then latest, but see you also in between. Have a great summer and enjoy. Thank you. Goodbye.